Brilliant. Great to see so many people on. And what I'll do then, if I can take over the screen then, and at any point, just pop messages into the chat if there's anything I'm missing or you missed something. Say we've got 45 minutes, Pam, a kind of quick one this morning. And so we'll go a wee bit of pace. I presume as well, I'm not going to go over how to make a classroom and things. I presume that most people will have done that by now, and if no, there'll be somebody in your staff, I'm sure, that can show you how to set them up. What I'd like to try and show is some examples of just maybe how to use it a wee bit better than maybe what you are if you're kind of new to it. So a wee bit of experience, and again, I'm in a lucky position because I'm not in a classroom to see so many different people using tools like this. So I picked up a great wee tip just the week before the holidays. So again, it's a lucky position I'm in to be able to get so many ideas for so many different people and hopefully share some of those with you. So again, if you've got any questions, or again, if you've got ideas or comments on how you use it, feel free to share those. And we'll try and finish up a wee bit sharp and give you a wee chance just to maybe share some examples or ask questions again at the end if there's anything you feel we've missed. So I'll just start to present. Sorry, I should probably introduce myself. I'll just get that carried away with. Pam, that you present so many times, you presume that you're presenting to the same people. So my name is John Milliken, and I work with the Education Scotland Digital Literacy, Digital Learning and Teaching team. So yeah, so I'll get started. What I'll do first is share my screen. I'll go for the whole screen. So, in case you've not seen it before, it's I can only point you towards our DigiLearn Scott site. So again, if there is anything that you missed today, it's worth going and checking and seeing if it is on DigiLearn Scott. So we've got our main page there with some news. We've got guest blogs coming in for people across the country, so you can maybe look for some examples of how other people are using digital learning and teaching in there. Any webinars we've done in the past, you can catch up and check those out. We've got upcoming webinars too. We've got our digital visions, which are really handy if you were on the session looking at the Digital Schools Award. Those are useful for that, and there's loads in there for cyber resilience and internet safety, particularly focusing on the cyber resilience side just now. But what I want to just make sure you're aware is the learning paths page. So again, anything you're looking for ideas for perhaps more interesting practice. We've got things, there's a whole page, for example, here, my colleague created on creating diagnostic questions. So when you're making a Microsoft or a Google form, for example, and you're making up that worksheet, really considering the questions, what I would always have done is you know, what is 5 take away 6? Or say, let's say 15 take away 6, I would have put in, you know, a correct answer, a nearly correct answer, and a very wrong answer. But actually using that, when you consider those questions that you use for a multiple choice, a common error we say something like 15 take away 6 is the learner will look at the first column and say that you can't do 5 take away 6, so move the 6 to the top. And the likely error is they'll do 6 take away 5 for the first column. So if they've got a 1, if they choose 11, for example, as their incorrect answer, that would maybe give you an inkling that that's the mistake they've made. So there's a whole page about how to use that type of thinking to construct questions. I hope you can. I've got the bin men outside. Don't know if that's coming across just now. There'll be a wee second. And also, there's a series of videos and images to support you with Microsoft tools, but also with the Google ones. You can see with Google Classroom here, I've got a whole webinar about everything you need to know about Google Classroom in an hour. But we've also split that down into short videos. So if you don't want to spend an hour watching the whole thing, you just need to know how to start a classroom. There's a 5-minute video there on how to create a classroom and how to get other people to join it. What we've also done is created these thing link overlays of the classroom layout. So there's what you'll see when you log into Google Classroom, and it's got a wee explainer for each of the buttons. So it's either got text that explains what this menu does, or it links to a video on, for example, how to create or join your own classroom. So we've created those thing links to help you navigate. If you or any of your colleagues get stuck with some things, it's always worth checking out that DigiLearn Scott page. And what's really useful is you will find Google and Microsoft videos out there telling you all the wonderful things that these product suites do, but quite often they're limited within Glow for users' well-being. So there's quite often there's features that maybe don't work through Glow. So if you're watching some American video about everything that G Suite does, it can be quite different from what our Glow tenancy does. So it's useful to look at these videos because they are relative to us in Scotland. So those are on digilearn.scot. So an overview of Google Classroom. Then you've got your Classroom there. Quite handy to have your stream for being able to update and share quick assignments or quick questions. You can even have a quick one using Classroom. If you want, you could create a quick question just to check in and see how your learners are. Post that into your stream, and again, just a quick check-in with your pupils. That's really useful. You could also have seen people using Microsoft Form or Google Forms as well. Microsoft Forms, use either one with Classroom, just to do those wee check-ins and things with your pupils as well. So I can ask that of all the pupils in my class. We can just see how people are feeling after the holidays, or share as something that you did in your week off. So again, quite useful to use Stream for things like anything that you post into your classroom is going to appear here. So it's useful for keeping your learners up to date and keeping up to date with your learners. Now, the one that I mentioned that I learned, I just picked this up, is a great idea that the other week there. Normally what I would suggest doing is creating a topic for your learners so that when you hand things out, let's say it's you do some work in computing science and you want to create an assignment within that. And when you create your assignment, you are going to share it to the topic here. I'm going to pick computing science. So I'm going to create some work about the internet. I'm going to assign that to computing science. That always made sense to me. That's what I would do in my classroom. I would have areas for handing out different tasks and jotters, for example. So I'd have a space for my maths jotters, a place to keep my whiteboards, a place for my literacy and English jotters and things. And that's what made sense to me. However, somebody pointed out that what they've been doing has been really effective is creating topic by week. So they're creating a topic for that week beginning, and that means that all the learning that they hand out in that week goes in that same place. Because what starts to happen is, after a while, this literacy in English, although the most up-to-date assignment is at the top, every literacy and English assignment that you hand out, so if it's every comprehension activity you're putting out once a week, that's going to fill up quite quickly. So it might be tricky for learners. You might want to do it by topic and term. So you could have literacy and English term 1. But I did think that was quite a clever way of thinking about it, and that's coming from somebody in a classroom, really thinking about that practically, that to assign a topic by week and creating the week, the topic as the week might be a better way to organise. So different ways to use it, but when you're creating assignments and handing out learning, you should definitely be using it through the classwork and the assignments. Couple of reasons I would say for that is the first one I said is in my classroom, and no doubt in your own, you've got a place for everything. A place to where things are stored to be handed out, or a place where things are handed in. Always a great deal of frustration when somebody puts their maths jotter in the literacy tray, but you've got a place for things, and so you should here. What we're quite is classrooms a wee bit better than Teams for this, I feel. What you quite often see is people just posting a link to a file here, but classwork gives us a place to put it, so that when I create an assignment, so let's say I've got some reading comprehension to do. What I would always make a point of doing is putting as well my learning intention in here, and my success criteria could go there, but also what I want to demonstrate to you is using a rubric and how that could be effective for your success criteria as well. So any instructions you need for your learners here. The first thing I always make sure to do as well is turn off the points in line with assessment for learning. So we're not looking for a score at a 10 or 100. Always make sure and turn that off, and that way the learners are going to focus on the feedback I'm going to provide, which I'll come back to in a second with the rubric. What's really handy is that from here I can create documents I've already got, or I can add things that I already have. So from here, I know that I've got some documents stored in my Google Drive that I've used previously. So hoping it's going to load here. So the first one I've got is I've got a text that I'd like my learners to use, and I also have a quiz sheet. So these are documents I've created earlier, and I've got three options, in fact, here for attaching them. So when I attach the document here, this is my text effectively, and I don't want my learners to be able to change that. I don't want somebody getting in and writing on the sheet and changing that for everybody else who's going to have access. So what I'm going to do is make sure that students can view it, but they cannot edit it. And for the worksheet, what I'm going to do here is make a copy for each student. So I only have to upload one. I don't have to go to the photocopy. I don't have to make 33 copies. I simply upload the worksheet, and as learners open it, it makes a new copy for each learner that accesses that. So that's really handy, saves a wee bit of time there. I'll show you the worksheets in fact, I'll show you them just now. So this has been lifted straight from Wikipedia, just as a demonstration, but there's some information about Zac Efron, and I want my learners to, you can even see by the citations and the highlight and the colours there that's been lifted from Wikipedia. But so I've got a text there. I want my learners to be able to look at that, read it for information, to be able to answer the questions. And here is my worksheet here. Just going to change the title there. That's just picked up each person that's used it. So here's, again, I've got my learning intention, my success criteria in line with that. Just a wee note there, I always want them to be able to write in Quanswer, so make sure they use the question to write their answer in a sentence. I think it's useful in terms of creating a word worksheet that you're using, I've just inserted a table. So there's not an answer box function or anything like that, but if I just insert a table and make it one cell, it just makes it a wee bit clearer to my learners that that's where I want the answer in that space there. So it's something that will be familiar to them, and it just makes it a wee bit tidier when they're answering. So they've got to look for this information in their worksheet, simple reading comprehension task, and when they're finished they can hand that in. But what's really useful is I can create a rubric to go with that. And again, rubric was a term that always put me off. It sounds very much like a university thing, but I think you can use it effectively to support your marking and your assessment. I would take the time to consider if it's worth it, or how much of, you might create a one cell rubric, so it's just got one thing it's marking against. I think it'd be more effective from a primary school perspective for something extended, like something for your social subject, some sort of interdisciplinary topic that you've been studying, a project, and where there's maybe a few pieces of work. You might create a rubric. For a piece of writing, you might create a rubric, so there's a few things you're marking against, a few E's and O's. However, for something like reading comprehension, it's worth considering, is it the same sorts of questions you're going to be asking over a number of lessons? And it's worth taking that time to create a rubric, or even just to create a short rubric. And at secondary school, it's probably going to be, again, rather than that, the kind of classroom, your single lesson activities, it might be more effective to just create a form and use that as a worksheet. But perhaps if you've got an essay or a piece of work you're working on over a number of weeks at a term, then a rubric's going to be more useful. So you can create a rubric from scratch, but I'm just going to start from one I've already used. So I'm going to reuse a rubric, and I've already created it. So there it is. It's handy for me. I can simply grab that and attach it. So it'll be the same if you start it from scratch. You have the same options here. So if I choose to edit it, I've turned off scoring. So scoring is turned on automatically. So again, I'm turning off the scoring, so I want to focus on the comments rather than the points. So the first one, the title, so I've called that using the text to find answers. I don't know why they always seem to go in a different order. But I've got good, and good work would be most answers are justified with evidence from the text. A rubbish answer would be, come and see me, you've not really answered the questions. And an excellent answer would be all of the answers are justified. And obviously, I'm having a wee bit of fun here with the language I'm using. That is up to you, the language that you choose to use. Obviously, we're looking for something more positive, but just in line with your school or authority, whatever the sort of language is you use for that kind of feedback about whether it's completely correct, it's mostly correct, or it needs a wee bit of work. And how you can create those is, the next one, let's say I'm going to do spelling. And did check mine. So again, an excellent bit of feedback might be so I can put the title, I can put the description for it, and then I can just add another one. And what's good is if you add one by mistake, you simply pick the vertical ellipsis and change that. So good is most spelling is accurate. Double check or spell check it, and again support required. So and see me or appear. So you might want to tell them to go and see appear about that. So that's what we do. We add in those descriptions, and once you've attached it, what's really good is the learner will see that, so they can see what you're expecting of them, so they'll know what the difference is between they're requiring support and they've done excellent at that. So whatever your focus is for assessment, you can make that quite clear to the learners. And what's good is they, as I say, they get to see it at the start, so they're really clear about the expectations. Could even use it for a bit of self-assessment, although they can't check the answer, they can't mark it, they can still they could use that to look over their spelling there and say, you know, I think this is all accurate. I've ran spell check. There's no red lines. Everything looks good to me. I think I've done some excellent spelling there. So that could be useful for that as well. When you go to assign it, you can assign it to the classroom. You can assign it to multiple classrooms. So especially useful if you're in secondary, you would be able to send that out to a range of classes. Or again, if you're working with somebody in the primary, say you're non-class contact, you might have 2 primary 4 classes doing something similar, and you could send them out the same assignment. You can choose which students it goes to. So unfortunately, there still isn't a group category. You cannot put learners into groups and say put it to the red group or the green group. But you can pick the learners, and that will only take a wee moment if that's something that you need to do, if it is only going to certain learners. You can put a due date on it. So again, perhaps not so much something we use in primary school, but again, perhaps secondary, you've got stuff coming in down the line. You might, again, have something like a topic or a project you're working on in primary and you want it completed in their own time. That might be something that you use there. And again, I'm going to put too much in the plagiarism one there just now. I think, if I'm right, that's still like an experimental tool, but it's there. You might want to use that. So when they hand something in, it will check if their task that they've handed in has been plagiarised. But again, I would take that with a wee pinch of salt. You can either save it for later if you're not finished. It will automatically save anyway. If I hit close, it will save the progress I've done. But always worth that. Anyone ever played an old console at the PlayStation will think with memory cards, you always double save everything just to make sure it's definitely saved. They probably that in your memory stick in school. Save it twice, call it save it 2, save 3, just to be sure. So save my draft, and that will save it for later, or assign it. What's then handy is once I've handed that out, my learners they'll get that updated in their stream that there's an assignment being handed out. So there was the one I did, obviously the last one that I just saved, but here's an example document there, so they know they've got that task to get on with. And that brings me to the marks bit, which again starts to become really useful. And I guess a lot of people made a move very quickly to online platforms like Teams and Classroom because of lockdown. And there's always that fear about whether we will or won't go back into one, or even some of your learners perhaps are off, and it might just be that they might be unwell, or they might be at home as a precaution. So it can be really handy to have that mixed delivery approach, that where your learners can access things whether they're in school or out of school. But I also think as well, moving to a more normalised mixed delivery would be beneficial for everyone anyway. So if you have access to devices in your school, whatever the number, I used to be able to get a hold of 6 Chromebooks during my literacy lesson times. They were available in the school, so I used them for my reading comprehension. It meant I could only get 6 on at a time, but that usually meant I could probably get a group each on that day. So on a Monday I had a reading comprehension slot, and I managed to get 12 of my learners to do their reading comprehension on the Monday, and then I worked the rest of them through the week for that. But it meant that I was able to capture more of the learning, and by using the online platform, it meant that there's a whole other bunch of benefits which I'll show you in a wee second. But for me as a teacher to keep track of it, it's great because I can pop in and see how everybody's getting on with this. So I can see, for example, here, so this is my reading comprehension, my Zac Efron worksheet. I can see if people have handed it in or not, so I can check who's completed that task or not, and hopefully I'll see that these three are in the same group. That's why they've done it. Again, if it's homework that you've handed out, or it's a project that they're completing partly in the class and partly at home, then you can check in and see how they're getting on with that. So I can have a look at their submission, and what I'm probably going to see here is A. Cantley has not started. So I can pop in and see, look, they've not even started. So if I've got a learner saying, oh, I've checking in after week 3 and the project's due in week 5, oh, I'm nearly finished, I've done most of it, you can pop in and see they've actually not started that. Again, if you've got a busy classroom, you've got 33 learners and you've got 6 or 7, or you get half them, depends what access to devices you've got. If they're working away in that worksheet, you can dip into each worksheet while they're working on it and see what progress they are making. So that's really effective, just to see where your learners are with a learning. Whether it's a simple worksheet or something a wee bit more creative than that, you can pop in and see where they are with it. I can use the rubric here. So if, let's imagine this has been completed to quite a good standard, I can use the rubric here, and for using the text to find the answers, yep, they've done that well. And it's similar to stamping a jotter. So you might have a wee stamp saying you're well done, but rather than writing your 2 stars and a wish, when it's those same sort of outcomes and comments, I mean, I'm thinking of marking my writing jotters, and the number of times you have to write is the wishes. Remember to write sentences, or make sure the sentences make sense and you've got punctuation in them, and you find you write the same bits over and over. So for things that you are doing on an ongoing basis, such as spelling or the punctuation, the layout you're writing, for example, I would use a rubric, and it means you can just simply put that feedback comment on there. You could have 3 or 4 comments. All you need to do is select the one that's appropriate for them. That will go into their work when it gets handed back to them, and it saves you a wee bit of time. And then what you can spend your time doing is providing useful feedback. So just remember to answering sentences, if that's the thing that they've not done. So they've not maybe used their punctuation for that, so it's not a proper sentence. But I can add in something quite meaningful to them that's going to inform their next steps and post that back to them. So the kind of generic things that against your success criteria that most people in the class will be doing, and then a specific comment that you can feed back to them, and you could actually go in and leave that feedback at any time. So that's been posted back to them, but I've not returned the document. I can now return it to them, and they'll get a wee notification saying that Mr. Millikins had a look at your learning and provided feedback on that. So again, that doesn't have to wait until the very end. You can feed that back at any time. So that's useful to keep an eye on where they are with the learning, how they're progressing, especially if they're a wee bit older and there's a bit of independence there. But it's definitely worth thinking about how you're going to use that for a more blended approach. So if I pause for a wee second, I'm just going to check back, see if there's any questions come in. Pam likes that idea. I don't know if anybody else has got any questions to pop in. So what you might notice different at the top of my screen here is I'm using a tool called Read Write. So Read and Write has a paid for element, but there is a free version. Your authority's got to have it made available, so that's something to maybe discuss later and check and see if we've got that, or maybe something to look at, Pal, about how we use it. If anybody's familiar with Microsoft Office, you'll be aware of Immersive Reader. So Google doesn't have an Immersive Reader function built in, but Read Write, the free option, does add that to Google Docs. So again, it's really important for me when I'm thinking about why am I going to the effort of making a worksheet on Classroom when I could just photocopy it and hand it out, or I could have them working from a textbook or writing in a jotter. And for me, it doesn't really matter if it's a worksheet or a textbook or wherever the learning comes from, some 10 questions you've just made up. It's the way that they're able to answer it, and that's where I think it's useful to use the computer rather than the just your regular jotters. We see if there's any questions there yet. No. So I'll keep going with that. So again, for me, it means that as my learners accessing this, they can open it up. So this is the read-only copy of the text. But if my learner opens that with Google Docs, what they'll be able to do is use some of those tools. So we've got the... Just going to make sure I've got the right ones. So I should have a highlighter built in here anyway. So there's my highlight. So I have got highlighter built in, but I'm used to using the read write when you see there's highlighters at the top. So if I'm reading for information, a strategy you might quite often do is have a look for. So the first question there was, and I feel I'm starting to maybe teach reading comprehension, which isn't my outline. So where was Zach born? Just to talk about the tools. So I'm looking for a place there, and the fact that I can simply highlight it. That might be a strategy that you've explored in class. And again, you're thinking, I think about my own classroom. I had a box of highlighters at the start of the year. By October, I've got slightly less highlighters. And by December, I probably have 1 or 2 highlighters that don't have lids. And that's something you might think about. Or if your learners are doing this at home, have they got access to highlighters? Or have they got easy access to highlighters? Or are they sharing highlighters with siblings? So there's a few different places there. I might want to highlight them both, and then I can come back and look at that. So I can use my highlighting strategies. What's really useful as well is it's always got built in with the read write, but the most important part with the read write, or if you're using the Microsoft Word features, you'll find it with Immersive Reader, is if I select a bit of text.
Efren has said that he would flip out if he got a B and not an A in school, as well as that he was a class.
So I can get the page read to me, which could be the difference for some learners between being able to access a text or not. So you can have the text read to them using this extension. And again, it might even just be that if a learner has a particular need around the way that text is displayed, they can even highlight the whole text, say they needed an overlay. That might be useful to have a different colour. And also, again, just being able to even change the size of the text is useful for a learner that might have, say, dyslexia or a visual stress that makes it a wee bit harder to read black on white. So the fact they're able to change the text that they're looking at, that could be, as I say, the difference for a learner being able to access it. And also when it comes to answering a text, one that is built in is the, so you see your spelling and grammar checks there that you would expect. But also the voice typing. So Zac Efron was born in California, full stop. So I can dictate my answer as well. So again, I think I had one boy in my class really struggled with his fine motor skills to hold a pencil. And it was hard to, the idea is to get a text. We gave him a Chromebook and we thought that's great, he'll be able to type and that will speed up his input. And then you pointed out that he'd never been taught how to type, so typing was quite slow, probably equally slow as writing. And then when I discovered that we had the dictate tool in there, actually I was able to give him a quiet corner of the classroom to be able to go and sit and do his writing. And you could just talk his whole text, and we ended up with 3 and 4 page stories for writing. That this boy was never ever able to do that. That was never going to happen when it came to using a pencil or even typing. So being able to use that voice function, voice to type function, could be the difference again for some of your learners there. So you can dictate. And again, for the teacher, come up to when you're thinking about feedback, you could put a feedback comment on with your voice, or when it comes to report cards, you could type your entire report card using your voice. So you could be sitting on the sofa or in the bath and able to just read aloud comments for your report cards and have them written on your laptop, which is sitting so but obviously make sure you're sharing your video when you do that. The could be really useful again for you as the teacher to be able to dictate, but certainly for your learners to be able to have texts that they can write with their voice. Also worth showing just on this, inserting an image. When it comes to putting images in, you might go through the old-fashioned route of finding something in Google, saving it to the computer in a folder, talking about giving it a meaningful file name. You can get rid of that completely because you can insert an image directly. You can have one on your computer, or you can search the web. And let's say we're learning about Zac Efron, isn't it? We find a picture of Zac Efron and stick in another image of him, or we might want to get a picture of The Rock who he co-starred with. That could even be the way you answer the question. Who did he star with in Baywatch? And they've got to insert a picture of The Rock right there rather than typing the words. So again, it just changes the way that the learners are able to access some simple activities like that. The last wee part you'll see as you go when you're in your class, and you create an assignment. There's a range of different types of assignment you can create. Forms is definitely worth a look. We've got a whole video on forms. If I can get through this part, I think we can have a quick look at forms. But what I'd like to show you, because I think that's literacy. If you think about numeracy, and again, I could share my learning intention success criteria along with the instructions here. But what I'm going to do is, when I've got the option to create, I don't get the option to create a Jamboard here, but I really want to share Jamboard with you in case it's a tool you aren't familiar with. So these are my Jamboards. Think of it as some whiteboards, and you'll see I've got one for each learner that's obviously accessed this in the past. But if I use the add button at the bottom, it will create me a new Jamboard. So this is Monday's numeracy. And it is just, I'm using a touchscreen device just now, so it's a wee bit easier for me, but I know you've got iPads and Chromebooks, for example, in your authority, depending on how many you've got in your school. So most of those devices are going to have touchscreen on them somewhere, and if not, you can always write with a mouse, but you'll obviously see the difference between my dexterity with a mouse and a pen. So I can write on that. I can add sticky notes. Share your ideas on this subject, and learners could just fire on sticky notes. So we did an activity with the Google trainers where it's clouds and anchors. So the clouds go on at the top, and those are your comments that you feel positive about, and your negative ones are ones that could be improved along the bottom. So you might want to do a sort of KWL at the start of a topic, and you want to find out what learners already know. You could insert a picture. Let's say, again, I can Google search it. So I might be doing a topic, say, about the animals and their habitats. So I could post the question, what do you know about polar bears? And learners could post their own images or their own comments. They could go and do some research, put those answers on post-it, so they could just write it on the screen. But if you've got multiple learners accessing the one Jamboard, post-it notes are easier to organise. And then again, as the teacher, you can just drag them and rearrange them. So if you've got loads and loads of post-its on the screen, it's a lot easier to just be able to put them in an order, whereas if learners are writing on the screen, that's a wee bit trickier. But what's really useful for this, as I say, is I can change the background. I can put on different, I can put grids, lines even, so if it's used for literacy. I quite like to use it as a maths tool. So I'm just going to zoom in a wee bit so my boxes are bigger, because I'm going to want to write 1 digit per box. Unfortunately, there's no ruler. That's one that comes up all the time with teachers. But again, take what you've got. You can write 1 digit per box. You can lay out calculations, show working. So again, if I got that, for example, if that was something that a learner handed into me, again, when I'm marking it, providing feedback, I can go in there with my pen and I can say, take a look here. So I can provide my feedback to that. But what I can also see is I can see my learner carrying out the calculation, so that if it was, for example, a subtraction, and they're doing this and making quite blatant errors across the place, I could be looking at that and seeing what the errors are. So if I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, that's totally wrong, there's been quite a few mistakes in there, I'm able to go back and say, check that it's a subtraction. I could have a look at this and say, well, why are we carrying something here? They've misunderstood the need to carry digits across. So I could go back and rework that example. I could rub it out and I could put my feedback onto that. So again, really useful as a maths tool, but again, I like to use it with MathsBot, if you've seen that. A section there on manipulatives. An example you always see me use is with the counting stick. Now, again, if you're using an iPad that you can screen capture, I'm just using the snipping tool. I'm going to copy that across to my Jamboard, put my background back in, and if I zoom in, So if I was doing a strategy such as counting my VIP numbers for the 4 times table, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So if I know 4 1s are 4, I know 4 5s are 20, and I know 4 10s are 40, so I've probably done my 1, 5, and 10 times table there. I probably know my 2s as well. But what I could then do is I could create that as an example for my learner and ask them to fill in the missing numbers. Or I could be using that as a demonstration in my class to show learners how to do it, and then giving them that strategy to be able to do it on their own Jamboards. So again, what I would know is that 8 add on 4, I'm counting up 4 each time, so I could do 8 add on 4 using counters or anything else, my fingers, and I know that that's 12, and the next one's 16, and I can check stacks on 20. I can even count back. So Jamboard's really a really useful tool, I think, for maths, because it lets you write on that screen the way that Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or anything else wouldn't do. But the part with Classroom is I can choose who to share it with. The best way to share it is always just to check your settings. So I want to change the link here. So mine's is going to Education Scotland. That's effectively my school or local authority. But I want it to be anybody with a link can access it. So I've got to change that option. And I need to make them an editor because I want them to be able to write on this. So now that I've done that, I'm going to copy the link. And hopefully you stuck with me with this one. If I go back to my classroom assignment and I add a link, again, students can view the file, they can edit it, and I can make a copy for each student. So if I've created a maths workbook there, for example, I could write some calculations on that Jamboard. On a new sheet, I could write a series of calculations, or I could take a screen snip of a worksheet I've already got and put it into Jamboard and want my learner to evidence how they've done that, how they've answered it. And again, they can do that using Jamboard. If I assign that task to them, when my learners open it up, they'll get access to that whiteboard, that maths jot that I've created for them there. Also, if you had access to the Screencastify Chrome extension as well, what you could even be asking learners to do, again, the free version of Screencastify is a Chrome extension that will let you record up to 5 minutes of your screen. So you could even have learners performing a calculation, and I'll switch to my pen, it'll be easier, try to write it with the mouse. I could capture that as a video and share that back to my teacher, actually showing how I've added things up if there was working to be shown. So for example, subtraction, you're exchanging, you'd be able to show step by step how you did it. And again, as a learner, you could watch back a video. Give me a second. Somebody sawing wood outside. You could watch a video back and see how a learner answered a question and where they've made any errors or parts that they've done well. So it's worth thinking about just some of those other tools. That's just about it. I don't know if there's any questions come in. If anybody's got any thoughts, we've got a few minutes left. If there's any questions or ideas of that you'd like to ask, or I could do just another couple of wee quick bits to go along with that, if that's...
Digital part of the DigiLearn Scott website Andrew's asking for. Show the digital vision part.
So on DigiLearn Scott, if you go to practitioner support and the digital visions, the first page will show you each of those posters. And again, if you've not seen those before, they're effectively a distillation of the E's and O's, the digital learning teaching strategy for Scotland, benchmarks. So really try to, rather than you having to go through 3 or 4 documents to find out, am I being a digital teacher or am I preparing activities for my learners to become digital learners? These statements are a kind of a condensed version of those different strategies. So an at-a-glance reference. And what I would always do is when I'm planning learning for a term, I would have that poster beside me. So when I come to my literacy, I'm having a look and saying which one of these, or the 2 of these, or however many I feel, how many of these match my reading comprehension task or my writing task, which one of these plugs into that. If I'm doing some science, does one of these statements, can I use that in my science learning, my maths learning? And I always think like that. What you'll find is it's probably going to be largely the same ones you'll find yourself coming back to. Again, just like that kind of ensure you've got that breadth there, that if you're hitting the same ones all the time, you can see that and you're maybe thinking, I have to do a wee bit of work, perhaps focusing on the skills to work with others. So using that collaborative function where there maybe when you create an assignment, if you attach a Word document to it, or perhaps even a Word document, a Google Doc, or even if it was a slides presentation or PowerPoint, you can make it that students can edit the file. But that means that all of the learners that you assign that to, so if I assign it to Catley, Morrison and Walker there, those 3 pupils will be able to access that document at the same time. So if you felt you needed to promote a bit of collaboration, what you can do is create a document for, you'd have to do it by assignment. So you'd have to create an assignment, perhaps for a group. So maybe 5 or 6 learners there. So those 7 can now access that document and edit it at the same time. What you can also do is if you've created the document, you can share it. So one learner might create that and then get a link and share it to someone on Google Classroom. So I might say, Pam, made this Word document. Do you want to collaborate with me on our Romans project, for example? And I could share that, allow Pam to access it, make sure she's obviously somebody that I trust before I do that, and then back in stream, I could share that.
George, you're not sharing your screen, so folks didn't see.
I did this last week. That's really annoying. Sorry, Pam. So digital visions here. So you see the different categories there. So it suggests that one about working with others. What I've done here is when I've created my doc and go to share, I can get the link for it. So I want Pam to be able to edit it. That's fine. That's already set as an editor. I can copy that link and I can paste that here into Google Classroom for Pam. And I can say, Pam, if you click that, you can work on your Romans project with me. We could both be writing the same document. So, and you can do that with any of the different file types in your classwork. So again, if you create an assignment, whether it's docs, slides or sheets, you can create that and you could share. So again, maybe one learner creates it on slides and another, they share the link to another learner, or if you have to, because you've got younger learners, you can create it. So if I create a slides document, and again, I can make it so that students can edit the file, and I'm just going to select some students. So I want these 5 students to work together on a presentation. So I can make them all editors, but not each student gets a copy. So it's one document rather than 5, and they're all able to edit it, but I can assign it to those 5 students, send it to them, say that's your project for this term or for this week or whatever it needs to be. But you've got to assign it to each assignment to each set of students. But as I said, what they can also do is share that and just make it and then share it to their pals so they can do that part if they're a wee bit more confident, again, just to promote that collaborative work in there if that's what you're working on. But yeah, as I said, the digital vision diagrams are there. I'll just share it again.
I've popped the link in the chat.
Brilliant, thanks for that. So again, you'll see there's ones for for teacher and learner are probably the most relevant. Might be if you're a head teacher or a leader in a school, you're maybe thinking about your head teacher, you want to think about that one. There's also the Gaelic versions there as well, if that's any use. But if you're a primary or secondary, perhaps your leaders want to have a look at those 5 statements and just think, where does our school meet those? Is there anything we need to develop? And that goes quite handily with your Digital Schools Award if that's something you're looking at also.
Fabulous. Thanks, George. Will we just open it up for any questions? I know we're just about finished now, so we'll just take any questions. Please turn your mics on, be brief. Even turn your cameras on.
What I'll show you as well just now, just as while people are perhaps come up with questions, is another one. Doesn't link into Google Classroom or anything at all. Could use it with whatever you're working on whatsoever. But Chrome Music Lab is definitely worth a look. The easiest music creation tool I've ever seen. There's some you can just draw on the screen. So if you wanted to know what does your name sound like, let me draw. So, and what it's doing is it's whatever strokes I put in the screen, and it'll play whatever I've drawn on the screen. It'll play that as music. You can shout at it and it'll make noises, and again, you can work in these wee rhythm games, or I quite like this one as a maths. When you're thinking about patterns, and you could create visual patterns which then also have an audio pattern that goes with them as well. So you can add beats along the bottom and have that played to them, and there's different ways they can make it sound. But if you're thinking about patterns, I like that activity. You might actually be doing music in your expressive arts, and that's a really simple way to get started with it. There's no way to record it, but you can, I'm not sure where that saves to. That's a new button, but you can also screen capture it. Say something on an iPad, or if you could Screencastify, you could be capturing those as well as for your assessment. So Chrome Music Lab's a free one.
Brilliant. Thanks, George. Any questions then? No? Fantastic.
A very quiet staff.
I don't believe that, Natalie. I don't believe that.
I just
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
If, see the marking thing that you had up, is that automatically created for you, or do you have to create that yourself?
When
you had the marking grid up, when you moved to marks, and it had all your your work down, is that automatically created depending on your student allocation then?
Yeah.
Yep, that just pulls the students from your class in and creates that grid, and that's all set up for you. So
that's really useful, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Natalie, were you going to ask something there?
No, I just came on. I was just trying to encourage other people to show their faces and get their mics on and speak up. But I have put in the chat at the side, Andy, you can maybe organise for us to have a look at that wee section for the leadership team. A wee second ago, that last wee bit. Great, thank you.
Fabulous. And I love Jamboard as well, because the first time I looked at Jamboard, I was kind of like, okay, it's a blank canvas. But actually, once you start seeing how other people use it, it really starts sparking things off. And I love the idea that you can send a link and say, right, work this out, show me how you work it out. And that link with Screencastify, we put a wee post in the DLC chat last week, Andy, if people are still having problems with Screencastify, we put a wee workaround in, so if there's any issues with that, let us know. But yeah, it's such an easy tool for the kids to record, and I love the idea of the kids saying, this is how I did it, and you can build up a wee kind of bank of that. What you were saying about peers, George, you know, so here's someone who got it right, who does a wee Screencastify in that Jamboard that can then share with the others, this is how I did it, so they've got that great peer-to-peer learning going on as well. So fabulous. Okay, well, I'm conscious of time, so if we've got no further questions, can I just say a huge thank you to George? That was so helpful. I love the fact that every time we talk, George, there's another little spark and my brain goes off around something that I either hadn't thought of or not seen before. So thanks very much for that. It was really, really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, George, on behalf of St James's as well, and thank you to Andy and Pam for setting it up. I hope everybody finds it really useful. I think it looks fantastic, and I loved that wee bit at the end there with the music. I'm going to try and show my kids that today.
I think a lot of comments at the side have been really positive as well, George, so thanks so much.
No, that's really appreciated. Thanks for joining us. And again, if there is anything that comes off, as Pam says, the wee sparks that go off when you start to use it and your colleagues use it and you see those examples, get back in touch with Pam and can look at doing further sessions to support and develop that. And can I just check as well, Pam, have you got an evaluation for this? Or
I have got a standard evaluation which I'll ping on to Andy if you could send out for everyone to fill out, and then we'll gather it that way. It's the link is there, I just don't have it off the top of my head, so I'll ping it on if that's okay.
No worries, I'll share that.
Just now.
yeah, I've got to evaluate everything, so just going to check if you had one, if you want one.
I've got one, I just can't see it immediately, it's not jumping out at me. You see this, I haven't put all my stuff into folders, it's terrible in my Google Drive, but I'll ping it on and we'll get it done. And please can we encourage everybody to fill it out, because as George says, it really helps us when it comes to what we're creating and what we're doing. We really, you know, if we have the feedback from you guys, it makes a huge difference, so please fill it out. I will ping it on. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pam.
Bye.